How the West receives Buddhism is as diverse as the range of Westerners. And so some are looking to Buddhism really for more of a kind of a relaxation technique, some kind of a method to help them have a little bit more equilibrium, a bit more peace of mind. And that's good, you know. And whatever it is, maybe they recite a mantra a little bit, maybe they practice shamatha, maybe they do a little bit of vipassana or a bit of just sitting in Zen. And so it's very easy, and it's often taught this way, that is, meditations, Buddhist meditations can be taught outside of any real meaningful context of a Buddhist worldview, Buddhist way of life, Buddhist values, and so forth. One can simply pluck out a technique, like, okay, mindfulness meditation, even make up a new name, or vipassana, or shamatha, or Zen, and even Vajrayana practices, Dzogchen. One can pluck them out of context and then just practice them all by themselves. And the Dalai Lama was asked about this once when I was with him during a Mind and Life Institute meeting, when he was introduced to the whole notion of mindfulness meditation. That's in this bare attention, just moment to moment, non-judgmental awareness. And when he was told about this type of practice and the scientific evidence that it was very useful, he was asked, well, what do you think of this? You know, what do you think? He said, very good. It's very good. Just don't confuse this with Buddhism. Right? And so out of context is not Buddhism, any more than just watching your breath going in and out. And that's not Buddhism, right? Or simply reciting some mantra. That's not Buddhism. So Buddhism is something very rich, it's something comprehensive, and it's not a matter of having to adopt a whole bunch of beliefs, but it is to understand that Buddhist meditation is embedded in a way of viewing reality that one is very welcome to and invited to check out very carefully, scrutinize, investigate. But the notion that views or beliefs are irrelevant to meditation is foolishness. The notion that meditation can really flourish, that it can bring about radical transformation without being embedded in ethics, is foolishness. So there must be a corresponding way of life, there must be a worldview that is consonant with one's meditative practice. And in that context, then we have authentic mindfulness, which is rooted in ethics, which goes hand in hand with the cultivation of samadhi, as well as the cultivation of other qualities of the heart, such as the four immeasurables, or the four divine abidings of loving kindness, compassion, empathetic joy, equanimity. And then mindfulness, of course, then is applied to the contemplative investigation of the nature of reality. Well, I'll weave that question in with the earlier one. So I mentioned some people are really wanting just have a little bit, you know, a little bit of Buddhism, a little bit of just a bit of practice. But now, will there be a true Western Buddhism? Might Buddhism really flourish in the West? My answer is clearly yes, and I would say this based upon experience. I know a number of Westerners now who have been practicing 30, 40 years, some less than that, but a number of them, and I won't mention names because that would mean excluding other names, but who have my very high regard, very deep respect. Their understanding is sound, they're very wonderfully ethical people, their minds are truly peaceful, they have genuine insight, they're benevolent and compassionate, and they're passing on a transmission. When they teach, they're passing on an authentic transmission, and they are recognized as such by their Japanese, their Thai, their Tibetan teachers, as yes, you're really maintaining the lineage here. So I think we already have an answer, and that is there are authentic practitioners of multiple schools of Buddhism, and I wouldn't even use the word now the West so much, because I've traveled so much, that I don't see so much difference between Singapore and Sydney, Australia, and Rio de Janeiro and New York and Moscow. But are there people now that Buddhism for the first time in 2,500 years has gone global? For 2,400 years it was pretty much an Asian phenomenon. And now over the last century or so it's become global. And so there are authentic practitioners and teachers. Some very, very conservative, as the most conservative, teachers from Burma, from Japan, from Tibet, and so forth. And then others way out there where they hardly, you know, they're just touching a little bit. They want to abandon all of the Buddhist worldview, anything that is incompatible with scientific materialism. Then they say, oh, we want to go to Buddhism with no beliefs, which means they don't want to question their materialistic beliefs, and so adopt a few Buddhist practices here and there and embed them entirely in a materialistic framework. And they're free to do so. To present that as authentic Buddhism is ridiculous. It just has no justification at all. But if that's what some people find most beneficial, then why not? So as the Dalai Lama said, the whole point of the Buddha Dharma is to help alleviate suffering. So within that spectrum, some will just take a pinch, some will go for total immersion. So yes, it is happening. And within that context, Tantra or Vajrayana Buddhism, for which I have very, very deep, not only respect, but reverence, yes, there's no question in my mind that this can play an important role in the dissemination, the flourishing of Buddhism in the modern world. And, not but, it's now having observed myself and others practicing Vajrayana Buddhism for decades, it just becomes all the clearer to me as the years go by that this whole dimension of the Buddhist teachings can really be practiced authentically if and only if it's firmly embedded in the Mahayana teachings, the broader context of the Bodhisattva way of life, the 6 perfections, teachings on shamatha, teachings on vipassana, teachings on bodhicitta, teachings on Buddha nature, all of those being within the Sutrayana, or the more, let's say, less esoteric. But because the Vajrayana, including Mahamudra and Dzogchen, doesn't make any sense without that foundation. It's assumed since the inception of these various schools of Vajrayana or lineages of Vajrayana. It's assumed that, well, of course you know that. It's like we're teaching you calculus, but we assumed you've already got algebra, geometry, trigonometry. You didn't? Oh, well, then go back and do that first, right? And so the Vajrayana must be embedded in its kind of the fertile soil of the Mahayana. But then it's equally true that if one is seeking to follow a bodhisattva way of life, seeking to gain insight into emptiness, develop bodhicitta, the 6 perfections and so forth, this also is kind of rootless. It's kind of floating in midair if one doesn't have a sound understanding of the Four Noble Truths, the 3 higher trainings of ethics, samadhi, wisdom. And so there's our bedrock, and this includes foundational teachings in shamatha, for example. Mindfulness of breathing is classic. The cultivation of the 4 measurables of loving kindness, compassion, and so on. The 4 applications of mindfulness. They're often somewhat overlooked or entirely overlooked in the Tibetan Buddhist tradition. But these are really foundational practices. They're the bedrock of Vipassana, I believe, for all schools of Buddhism. So to skip that and say, oh no, that's for Hinayana, that's for inferior people, not people like me, because I'm going directly for emptiness. Well, there may be some prodigies here and there who can go just directly to teachings of emptiness, as there may be prodigies who can go directly to teachings on Vajrayana, Dzogchen, Mahamudra, and gain authentic realization. So I don't count that out. But having observed how things are going for the last 40 years or so, I would say most of us, including myself, are not prodigies. We're sincere, we're dedicated, intelligent enough, but to derive the full benefit of the Vajrayana, it must be embedded in Mahayana. To derive full benefit of Mahayana, it must be embedded in Shravakayana, and that is the teachings that are really oriented towards your own liberation from the inner causes of suffering.